Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Rocco del Priore. He's the co-founder of Swede. Thank you very much for joining me today, Rocco.
Thank you for having me, David.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Rocco, I always like to start the podcast with a little bit of background. So how did you find yourself working in the weed industry?
Great question. It's a great question to ask anybody in this industry, honestly. Well, my background's in software. I had originally, when I was in college, started working on a startup that was basically like Siri for Salesforce. You would talk into your phone, it would create a new deal for you, a new opportunity, whatever it is that you might be working on that day. Eventually, I made it out to California and was working for Apple for a little bit and had all these friends that were in the startup scene, but I felt like a lot of people were making the equivalent of, Tinder for dogs, so to speak. I really wanted to work in something that was tangential, something that I could make a difference in, something I cared about. And right next to me seemed to be cannabis. San Francisco was kind of the capital of the cannabis technology for a while as well. And it seemed like a match made in heaven. So I threw caution in the wind and I kind of dropped everything out of the software world and went right into cannabis.
So are you an entrepreneur? Or do you have that entrepreneurial spirit? Or, what was it that made you want to kind of walk away from Salesforce and the Apples out there and go out on your own?
Great question. So I had actually always wanted to work for Apple. It was a dream of mine for a very long time. But when I got there, I actually didn't like it very much. And, Apple's a great company. They make great products. They have a lot of good people working there. But it moves very slow. There's a lot of bureaucracy when you're building a product that's used, by billions of people. And for everything in their life, you've got to run through a lot of steps before you do anything. And I just wanted to move a lot faster. I find that smaller companies, startups, and anything that you control yourself gives you that kind of leeway and that freedom.
So once you had that freedom, how'd you get started?
Really good question. I literally flew out to Colorado, which was the big rec state at the time. And I started walking into dispensaries and asking people what their problems were and just asking if I could shadow for a day and look around, basically. My first product in the space was an e-commerce product. It was called Cultivate. It was very similar to I Heart Jane today, but certainly far before Jane was ever founded. Baker was the other big player at the time. But yeah, I literally just rolled my sleeves up and I didn't know anything at the start. Just sort of started talking to people and figuring out what the big problems were. Eventually started working with the big point of sale companies as I was building the e-commerce application. And now I'm one of those big point of sale companies myself some years later.
What happened to the previous company?
Interesting question. It ultimately ended up fizzling out. I ended up going to work with a business partner of mine, Felipe, for a company called Dionamed in California. We had very reasonable traction at a certain point, but we were totally reliant on the point of sale systems. We were reliant on the APIs that they had to be able to host their inventory. Everything was very manual back in the day. You were managing your menu and your e-commerce solution, your point of sale solution. And we were just beholden to these big companies that weren't moving, these big point of sale companies. A buddy of mine, Felipe, reached out, had an awesome opportunity in California and wanted me to come work with him. He had been lobbying me to do that for a while. So I finally said yes, and I went back to California.
So when you first went to those dispensaries in Colorado, do you find dispensaries across the U.S. still struggling with some of the same challenges?
At a high level, yeah. But at a low level, so many things have changed. Back when I was doing this, Metric didn't even have an API. So people were still uploading sales with spreadsheets and stuff. Retail stores are still retail stores. They're still selling weed at the end of the day. And the types of problems they have, reducing labor costs, driving revenue, all of the sorts of things that drive efficiency in every part of your business, whether it's opening drawers or performing inventory counts, all of those still things fundamentally exist. But we have much better solutions for them, both within Swede and also throughout the rest of the industry. Like everybody, this was 10 years ago now. Everyone has been improved quite a bit, thankfully.
So what does Swede have to offer?
Great question. So Swede is an all-in-one platform for cannabis retailers. So that means that we offer them a point of sale system. We offer them a complete set of marketing tools to include a loyalty program, a referral program, text message marketing, email marketing, and even native push notifications. which leads us into our next part. We also offer an entire e-commerce solution. So that includes a white labeled web app. It includes a native app that customers can download on their phone. And then, like I mentioned before with marketing, you can actually go ahead and send them push notifications, which, unlike text messages, are real time, they're free to send, and they're completely unfiltered. So you can say whatever you'd like. I know that SMS has become somewhat of a headache in the cannabis industry over the past couple of years. I think this is really going to be a good response to that. So yeah, to answer your question, we're an all-in-one platform for cannabis retailers.
How long did it take you to build it?
Quite some time. So we've been building this for over 6 years now. And we were really quiet at first. We had a very interesting approach to the market. We really only worked with a select few enterprise operators, so people who were really at the top of the chain. We came in at an interesting time. We kind of have a second mover advantage here, where there was a lot of companies that existed from the beginning. Like, you've got your MJ Freeways, your BioTracks, but a lot of those companies have had to change very rapidly as new states have legalized and as rules have been developed. And we kind of had the advantage of coming in as, I myself, having been a cannabis operator before and having the experience with these platforms, we knew exactly what we wanted to build from day one. So we knew we wanted it to be all in one. We knew we wanted it to work for the enterprise multi-state operator, and we knew we needed it to be white labeled. So yeah, it took a good 2 or 3 years before we really started going to market.
With that many years in development, how did you know you were ready to finally pull the trigger?
A good question. I mean, part of it is basically when people are willing to use it, right? But then the other part of it is that we're very lucky to have experience with this stuff before we started building it. Like I said, I was running licenses in California. I know what it's like to run a point of sale. I know what it's like to run delivery. And so we had our own internal thresholds for what needed to be there in order for this to be a viable solution that's better than the competition. We're very far away from that now, obviously. I'm biased, but I consider ourselves to be the premier enterprise platform in the market. But yeah, it was a combination of market response and knowing what we knew as operators.
Understanding that you do have that bias, in your opinion, other than, your financial stake in the company, why is it better than everything else out there?
So I think it's better for a couple of key reasons. One, of that all-in-one approach is very unique. And right now, just to set some context for your viewers, if you're a dispensary, you're probably going to have one software for point of sale. You're going to have another software for loyalty, another one for emails, another one for text messages, another one for e-commerce. So now we've got 5 of them. So you've got one customer record that exists in 5 different places. And by bringing it all in one house, you create a cohesive experience for the customer, but you're also building what's really a true CRM, a customer relationship management platform. So now we've got all of this data on consumers. Their experience is really cohesive. They can go to one place to see their purchase history, their medical information, their loyalty points. But we've got all this data in one place, which is going to be super duper helpful for this AI renaissance that I think everybody recognizes that we're going through. It's the data quality is going to become a hot commodity, I think, over the course of the next year or two. And we're extremely well positioned for that. So we're an all-in-one platform that provides everything you need to run your store and has all the data in one place. We partner with you guys with a really unique relationship. We'll join your meetings on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. We'll help you build out your own feature requests. And we actually do come through on these things, which is, I think, a big differentiator. If you talk to people in the industry and you talk to our clients who have worked with us, it's really a fundamentally different experience. And I think that we're the only one who's really in a position to provide that.
No, I do think that level of service really does set you apart. I mean, having worked with other software providers in various industries, it is one thing to have them in the meeting, and then it's one thing after you leave the meeting to actually get something done.
Right. Like, there's what you say you're going to do, and then there's what you deliver in a few weeks from that.
So with those insights for the operators, how are you going to empower operators to use that data to their benefit?
Great question. So we already have a tremendous number of tools that allow you to automate the experience for customers. So it's going to be a big theme for us in the course of the next year, and it already was for the latter half of last year. But where we're going with this is all personalized content. So David, what do you like to consume? Are you more of an edible guy? Do you like vape carts, flower? What's your drug of choice?
More of an edible guy.
More of an edible guy.
Flower, yeah.
Cool. So I primarily purchase flower. That's how I consume. Most of the time, if you go to any dispensary's website, you're going to see the same thing that I will. However, if you go to a Swede website, you won't know that it's Swede. It'll just be branded as the client. But you might log in and see edible purchases, whereas I might log in and I might see all the best selling flower products. And that's because as soon as you log in, Sweet starts curtailing the menu to you. And you can, as the operator, as the client, choose exactly how it's going to do that. So we can recommend products for you just based on your previous history. We can put people into segments where it says, okay, well, these people mostly purchase flower and their ticket is usually $80. So these are the products we want to push to them. You can let the system do all of the work, or you can try and design it in any way that you would like to. But the critical portions are either A, we actually have the data to make these kind of tools useful. And B, we give you a really simple interface for actually making this stuff come to reality. You don't have to do it once for e-commerce and once for point of sale. You don't have to do it once for all of your stores. You can set it up once and have it impact a whole state or the whole country for e-commerce, the app, the kiosk, the menu, everything.
So people can customize it to their own liking, but do you recommend that they kind of just use the automated version of it rather than kind of tinkering behind the scenes?
No, I absolutely recommend that they tinker. I mean, you need to understand your business, and a dispensary that's selling in Florida and a dispensary that's selling in Michigan are going to have two completely different experiences. These markets differ a lot in terms of product availability, pricing, average income of the residents, even just culture. So even a company, that is operating in 3 or 4 different states is probably going to want to start to study their customers in each one of those markets. The system's going to do a lot for you out of the box, but we're also trying to give you all the tools to help you understand your customer base and what's going to actually improve your business.
I mean, this almost sounds like at least in one person, maybe multiple. Is this something that companies are going to need to hire on one or multiple members of a team to really be able to bring these insights to actionable things for their business?
I love where your head's at, man. So traditionally, so far, we've primarily worked with the enterprise market, and we're lucky enough to work with companies that already have huge teams of people who are dedicated to doing this work on a monthly basis anyways. So our first step was kind of to get the tools in the hands of those people, see how they use it, and start automating what they do and allowing them to do even more. Now that we're kind of at that step and we're about to start reaching out to the folks who aren't quite as enterprise, the mid to lower tier market, we are absolutely introducing tools that are going to make all of these suggestions for you. So eventually you'll get to a point where the system is just telling you what you should be discounting. Maybe you tweak it a little bit, but you click a button to go. So where we're at right now is we've provided some pretty unbelievable tools for the folks who have the bandwidth to kind of do that stuff. And that's our client profile right now. And where we're going is a place where we can service pretty much anybody across the country. And the system's going to do a lot of that work for you. It doesn't mean that these big companies are going to get rid of these marketing departments. It just means that those marketing departments are going to be able to do a lot more than what they were doing previously with the same headcount.
How does the cost model work, and what kind of ROI can people expect?
Good question. So the cost model is a SaaS-based model right now. So we actually break it up into several different components. You can purchase point of sale. You could also purchase e-commerce, and you can purchase marketing on top of that. The reality is that almost everybody purchases all 3 bundles. I don't think we really have anybody who wanted to piece it out. The primary reason we do that is because there may be places where, for whatever reason, state regulations forbid you from using huge portions of the software. And in those instances, obviously, we're not going to charge you for that. We're going to work out something so that it makes sense for the market that you're operating in.
Okay. And then in terms of ROI, I guess, is it different for everybody?
Yes. As you're probably picking up, the cannabis market is pretty varied in terms of state to state. Like, for example, you go to Arkansas, your average ticket's going to be under $15, maybe 20. You go to Maryland, that ticket's going to be $90. So what you can do in terms of improving your margins and your costs and all of these other things, that does vary a lot market to market. I will say one of the things that's pretty consistent no matter where you are is actually the efficiency portions of things. So for example, we have our own proprietary software and process for inventory counts. You have this discount managing platform that you can use to manage both e-commerce and online and all the stores at once. And no matter who you are, you're going to gain a lot of efficiency just from starting to pick up those tools right off the bat. So that's going to help you a lot. And to give you some hard numbers, in Illinois, where it's a daily requirement for the stores to count all of their inventory, we've taken people who previously on their old point of sale software, they were spending over an hour a day counting inventory. We've gotten that down to 20 minutes or even under, even to the point where stores were previously starting to count before the store was closed so they could get out of there in time. And now they just wait until all the sales are done and just do it all at once because it's so much faster.
I understand that the platform has tools that can help many different parts of the business, but is the inventory management portion of this where people can see some almost immediate benefit?
I think so. And I think that this is where it's really going to depend on what piece of software that you were using previously. There's a huge degree in quality in terms of how our competitors manage inventory. Some of them do a very reasonable job. There are others that can really cause you a lot of pain. The other big portion is depends on what market you're operating in. If you depends whether you're marketing with the new BioTrack software in Florida or a metric state like California that really hasn't changed in the past 5 years. So it really differs market to market what you're going to get out of it. What I will say is that I have yet to see a piece of software that has the same kind of one-to-one relationship with state tracking softwares that Swede does. We make it really easy for you guys to understand exactly what's going on in your traceability system and follow a line of actions to understand exactly how you got to where you are today, which I think is probably the best that a point of sale provider can do.
Once people decide to bring it in-house, how long is the on-ramp and what does the training look like?
Another really great set of questions. So the on-ramp is really up to you. It's dependent on how quickly your organization wants to move. One of the things that makes onboarding take a little bit longer with Swede than it would with maybe Jane, for example, is that we touch so many parts of the business. We're not just going to be meeting with the marketing, the e-commerce team. We're going to have to meet with compliance and finance and all these other folks. And we're not going to go ahead and uproot you with your existing piece of software until everybody, both us and you guys, are 100% on the same page that we've checked all the boxes and we're going to do everything that you currently do or better. So I've had people who come onto the platform and go from hi, nice to meet you. So we're using Swede in a little over a week. I've also had people take 4 or 5 months. So it's really dependent on your appetite and how quickly you want to move. Okay. That's what it comes down to. I think you had a second question there. What was the second one?
The on-ramp and then the training.
So training. So we're going to sit you down and do it group by group. We're pretty flexible in terms of how we structure the training. It's largely going to be based on how your organization is structured in terms of departments, but mostly the same kind of groups exist. You've got compliance, you've got retail, you've got financials, you've got marketing, which is sometimes split up between outbound and promotions and things of that nature. And basically, you're going to have an account manager that walks you through the whole process, orchestrates everything with you. And each individual set of training will be led by the person at Swede who's best equipped to do that. So, for example, we have a team of marketing specialists whose whole job it is just to sit down with you, examine your loyalty program, the discounts you run on a weekly basis, and not only show you how to do it in Swede, but also talk to you about how it could be better.
I know that they're never supposed to happen, but bugs are inevitable. What is your response when a bug comes up and somebody needs a little help?
Great question. So we have an integrated support chat built into the product. So no matter who you are, if you're a bud tender or the CEO, if you log into Swede, you'll be able to message us immediately. We have an average under 2 minute and 30-second response time to that. And the average time to close an issue is a little over an hour. So things are resolved pretty quickly. Honestly, David, the proof of this is in the pudding. So for anybody who's concerned about this, I'm more than happy to talk about the statistics and talk about our uptime and things of that nature. But I would encourage you to just go talk to some operators who are using Swede. This is one of the areas where we really do have a leg up on the industry standard. So I would be thrilled to have pretty much anybody on the platform talk about their experience.
I was reading a recent story about Swede's. It's the SOC1 and SOC2 type 2 audits. Can you talk through what those are exactly and the significance of Swede's capabilities?
Sure. So the SOC auditing system is just a compliance guideline or standard, basically. It's broken into 2 parts. You have 1 and 2, and then it gets a little more confusing. For both 1 and 2, you have type 1 and type 2. So okay. I'll try and explain the matrix for you. Type or SOC 1 is really meant for things like financial reporting and controls, whereas SOC 2 is really more around data and security. And then when you talk about type 1 versus type 2, this is the thing that I would encourage your viewers to pay attention to. So when you achieve your type 1 certification, what that means is that you've presented a plan that says this is how my business is going to run and this is how we're going to remain compliant. But at no point has anybody double checked that you follow the plan. And you don't even have to say that you have followed the plan to submit your type 1. Your type 2 is the exact same thing. The only difference is you've had an auditor actually review all of your activity for a period of time and prove that you are meeting the standard that you set out and committed to. So there's a lot of folks in the industry who might have a type 1 certification for either SOC or 2. I think the reason why this announcement is exciting and the thing that's kind of different is that we actually achieved our type 2, which meant that we had an auditor review our activity over a period of months. They confirmed that we are actually following these controls and we meet the standards. And we could talk a little bit more about what that means and why it's a good thing, but I'll pause there for a moment. Does the matrix kind of make sense to you between SOC 1 and 2 and type 1 and type 2?
No, it does make sense. Thank you. So what does that mean and why is it important?
Sure. And you're absolutely welcome. They could not have come up with a worse naming convention. So I think this does two things. One, this is going to be a requirement for a lot of governing bodies moving forward. You've even seen some states adopt it. It's already a quasi requirement for public companies. And again, I think you're going to start to see these standards be adopted more and more as something that both governments and regulators are looking for, regardless of whether that's a cannabis regulator or a financial markets regulator. The reason I think that this is actually cool to share and worth talking about is exactly related to that second mover advantage that I mentioned earlier. So again, it's one thing to go ahead and say that you've gotten your type 1 and that you understand what SOX is and what you're supposed to be doing. It's another thing to say, okay, we actually are capable of doing that. And the fact that we are, I think, speaks volumes to the state of maturity that the company is at and what we can actually provide to our customers.
So you had those benefits being the second mover. How is your company built to sort of change with the times as new regulations come up or the industry shifts?
So there's nobody that can do this perfectly. Like everybody else, one of the moats in the cannabis industry as a software provider is that you're going to have to change on a whim to meet the requirements and the wishes of the regulators. I think the best way that we've done this, and something that I'm really proud about in terms of the company in general, is just our ethos around being a product-focused company. We existed for years without a real sales team or a real marketing team. We put every single dollar into the engineering department. And as a result, we have the largest engineering team in the cannabis industry for software. So I think that, our secret weapon to this or whatever may have you is really just being very disciplined product people and putting every dollar that we can into the product side of the business so that we can react quickly, build quickly. And that's also the same thing that allows us to have the relationship with our clients that we do now.
Okay. As you're talking to customers out there, what are some of the things that they're still looking for from the Swede platform that might be coming in subsequent rollouts?
Let me be careful about how much I talk about this, just because we're a very client-driven platform. So a lot of the things that we build are on request of our clients, and I don't want to give too much away in terms of what they're looking for. So at a very high level, I'll tell you that obviously AI is going to be a really big thing this year. I think another thing that's going to be really impactful is this final bridge between the retail and the wholesale world. So you're probably familiar with our relationship with Leaf Trade, a company that we merged with a couple of years ago, and we recently sold off that asset to LeafLink. We still have a really great relationship with them. And I'm excited to see what that relationship can do here in the immediate future.
What are your expectations for AI in cannabis? And because it is such a buzzword that everyone wants a piece of, but a lot of people don't really know how to proceed with a plan. How can people use it the right way without taking a few steps back?
I don't think that there's a single answer to that question, to be honest, because it really depends on what you're working with. Like if you've got really great, clean customer data and you've got, a tool that you can use, a point of sale system or elsewise that you can extract that out of and make some use of right now, then there are some great generic tools that are out there that you can start to work with. But it's going to take some effort. You're going to have to manage the data and do it yourself. In terms of platforms out there that are actually providing, real benefits of AI, using it as an actual tool, I really don't know that many beyond ourselves. We're the only company that I know of that has AI recommended products for both the bud tender and the customer review, both online and in point of sale. So I think for the majority of operators, it's really going to be they're going to be waiting until the functionality is included in the technology that they use. If they have the wherewithal and the motivation to do so, then I would highly, highly recommend that everybody starts to get a real grip on their data now. You can extract this stuff and start to use some third-party tools to make use of it in terms of what you're going to reorder, how you're going to do your discounts, what you should be promoting to customers. But the bottom line is you're going to get the most out of these things when they become embedded in the tools that are made available to you. So my piece of advice would be A, start thinking hard about how your data is managed, how clean it is, and how you're going to improve that. And then B, start keeping a very close eye on the industry in terms of the platforms that are evolving and actually going to let you make use of this stuff early. The people who start doing it sooner are going to be the people who get the most out of it.
Well, I feel like by nature, owners have this bias that they're doing it the best they can. But how do you know if you have dirty data versus clean data? Is there any real way to just figure that out?
Yeah, there are some top level rules that you can definitely apply. So for example, just at a very high level, is your data all stored in the same place? Or do you have parts of the customer records here and parts of the customer records there? Second level, what kind of duplication prevention do you have? Like, are you doing anything to make sure that customers are actually unique and only have one profile? Third level, for the piece of information that you are collecting from customers, their driver's license information, their phone numbers, their email address, are you verifying any of those things? Like, for example, the vast majority of providers out there right now, they might allow you to collect phone numbers or email addresses, but they don't do anything to attempt to verify them. So if you make a typo, worst case scenario, you're sending marketing messaging related to cannabis to a minor. Best case scenario, it's not being delivered and you're nuking your deliverability rate. So I get that it's complicated and you can definitely dig into the weeds, but at a very high level, there are some very basic data standards that everybody can start to adopt right now. And I guess if you're listening to this and you don't know what those are, I would start with try and make sure all your data is in the same place. Try and make sure you don't have duplicate records of everything. And think hard about what methods you're using to collect that data and how valuable it actually is.
Excuse me. What are the opportunities with that bridge to the wholesale market that you're talking about?
Sure. So right now, the way that wholesale works in cannabis is going to sound very amusing to somebody who works in the traditional retail industry. Traditionally, you have a system just like you would if you're a consumer, where you can go online and order products from a customer. And there are two great platforms out there that allow you to do that today. There's LeafLink, there's LeafTrade, both of which allow you to automatically place orders from vendors. And in some markets, you have really great penetration of these products and you have great use and everything works out awesome. But in a lot of other markets, you're literally ordering stuff by calling up Joe Blow on the phone and saying, I want these many eighths and these many gummies, or going back and forth via email, sharing spreadsheets and PDFs of invoices and order statements. And then when the product actually gets to the store, you then have to do this dance where you've got, okay, I've got what my state expects to be in the transfer. I've got what my point of sale says is in the transfer. And then I've got what my own internal inventory procurement team says we should be receiving. You've got to marry all of that up. And we haven't even gotten to the place yet where your system should really be making suggestions on what it is that you're supposed to be ordering. So there's a lot of opportunity in this field to connect those two things, to build a better relationship between the brands and producers and the retailers, and to really build efficiency at every single step in the process for replenishing inventory at a retail location.
Why haven't some of those connections been made yet? It just seems like such a day one thing to do.
Well, I think there's a couple of different reasons. And, many people are open to their opinions on this. I don't think that there's a strict right answer. Part of it is the fact that we're a brand new industry. We got to do everything from scratch. You can't go and sign up with Stripe and get payments. You can't go and sign up with Twilio to start sending text messages. So there was just so much to build in the beginning, and everybody's doing this in silos. Like the situation I described earlier, where retail is traditionally using 5 or 6 different products to do this, and all of them have to build integrations with each other. So from the get-go, you just have a lot of work to do, and work is being prioritized on like an as absolutely needed basis. And then from a secondary part of this, you got a chicken and an egg problem. A marketplace is only as good as to a buyer as the sellers are on it, and it's only as good to a seller as the buyers are on it. And that's, traditionally a very hard problem to solve regardless of what industry you're in. So I think it's a combination of those things and also the relationship that these companies have in the industry and just the way it's evolved. So
you said you're a flower guy. Anything that you've seen recently that you found particularly outstanding?
I will say this, there's been a trend for infused flower recently that I'm a huge fan of. And regardless of whether that means that you're infusing it with actual distillate or keef or shake, or I've even seen just recently last week, I picked up an eighth that was diamonds infused. So they had gotten diamonds as a concentrate, crushed it up into almost like a fine keef, and then sprinkled it all over the flower. And I think that's really cool. It's kind of bridging the gap between the flower and the concentrate market. And as we're tapping out here on the maximum ranges for THC potency on a batch, it's allowing you to get you that extra THC without actually having to manipulate the genetics too much. So in terms of trends, as far as flower goes, I expect to see more of that. And that's something that I've really enjoyed as a consumer.
What's your long-term expectations for Sweet?
World domination? I don't know. No, look, we started this company because we viewed a few things as wrong in the industry, and we were really disappointed with the options that are out there for both point of sale and inventory management. In some ways, we've achieved a lot of the goals that we set out there with in the beginning, but we're still only serving a very small portion of the industry. We're really only working with the enterprise market. My goal is to get this to a point where we can help out everybody, regardless of what vertical they're a part of. I don't want to be too cheesy and give you a Steve Jobs quote, but I think we all just really want to make a positive difference in this industry. And we're going to keep working on this as long as there's a more positive difference and better impact that we can make.
Once you achieve that, do you see yourself on to the next or continuing to build upon Sweet?
We're talking so far out, I couldn't begin to tell you, David. I mean, one, there's a lot of work left to be done in this industry, and I don't think I'm going anywhere anytime soon. And then two, we also don't really know what this industry holds. I mean, there's this federal legalization thing that's looming over everybody's heads and has been since the beginning. There's whatever states want to do. The international market is starting to pick up. So I can tell you that I'll be here helping people, but I don't think anybody can tell you exactly what the world's going to look like in 5 years from now when it comes to cannabis.
No, that is the one thing that you learn after being in cannabis for a while, is that all the predictions are for naught. But that said, what are your predictions for the cannabis market this next year and maybe the next 5 years?
Okay, fair enough. So I think that we're going to see a lot of the smaller software vendors kind of start to consolidate. A few years ago, we had these very heavy rounds of fundraising where there was really great market opportunity and a lot of people raised a lot of money. Some of those people are at the end of that money and they're not necessarily profitable yet. And the competition's heating up, and also the market, it doesn't look like what it did a few years ago to raise money. So I think we're going to start to see some of these smaller vendors consolidate. And I think that you're going to start to see competition from a software perspective sort of heat up in the mom and pop to mid-size market. Excuse me. I also think that the bigger operators in terms of the actual license holders are going to start to focus a lot more on profitability. And we've already started to see this. If you look at some of the announcements from the past 6 to 8 months of what the big operators are doing, 2 or 3 years ago, was every few months you would see that they were buying another company and rolling things up. And now you're seeing they're actually starting to shed some of the markets where they're not quite as profitable. I think we saw a lot of this with Florida not going rec this year. That was a big upset to a lot of folks. And I think that there's going to be a really big push and focus on the enterprise market to, if not become profitable, then at the very least improve your margins. So I think that gives you a software and a sort of license holder perspective. Hopefully that answers your question as best as we can without having a crystal ball.
No, it does. And as you see some of those people out there struggle or look for a lifeline, do you have any ambitions to grow via acquisition?
It's something that's definitely on the table. I can't say that I have an explicit ambition to do that. I have an ambition to grow in any way that we can. And if it makes sense, then great. So it's certainly not a goal of mine, but it's also not something that's off the table by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay. Well, I really do appreciate you taking the time today, but I always want to make sure we haven't left anything out or, want to make sure that if there's anything in particular you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or your company, you have an opportunity to do so. So we leave anything out?
I don't think we left too much out, but I'd like to just finish with reminding folks of who we are, what we do, and where you can find us. If you're interested about anything I've said here today, you can find us at swedpos.com. That's just weed with an S at the beginning of it, pos.com. And if you're interested in chatting with us, please reach out. We'd love to talk to you. We're really excited to be making a difference in this industry, and I'm excited to start, serving a larger market.
How'd you come up with the name?
Software for weed.
I wanted to know it was that simple. I was thinking about, yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, very good. Thank you again for taking the time, Rocco. I really appreciate it, man.
Likewise, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach out to me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right. For Rocco Del Priore, co-founder of Swede, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.